And let's start. I'm sorry for the little late start because I was waiting for Ayub to come to the front. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, students. Thank you, all family, and everybody that's coming to support Ayub's launch of the book. I saw the PDF version, so if you don't mind, I also want to hold it. I'm very traditionalist. I like to hold a hard copy of a book. Thank you for sharing the PDF version with me, Ayub, and I really enjoyed it. There were some parts of the book that I found quite profound, quite interesting, and I just want to congratulate you before we start asking you some difficult questions. And there was one earlier in his life when they went swimming, the brother and him went swimming in the dam, and he see his brother drown. I mean, that's so traumatic for a youngster to start life like that, yeah. And then the ending was absolutely extraordinary. Should I tell them, or are you going to be angry? He stayed in downtown Johannesburg, and you know, those days in the 70s and the 80s, the artists and the poets, etc., did not receive the kind of funding they receive now for the arts. And of course, it was during apartheid as well. And he was staying in the Salvation Army home. And he left in the morning, like he always does. And as he leaves the Salvation Army, he goes down. Some people see him, some of the kind of usuals, that he greets, etc. And they never found him. They never found his body. Yes, that is extraordinary. Yeah. All right. That's Rowan. Okay. It's very interesting that a poet engages with the intersectionality of race, class, and especially social issues. And I wonder whether you also enjoyed the way he plays with words, Ayub, and the way he plays with structure, and the way he plays with tone, and also with dialects. There's different dialects of Afrikaans, and that juxtaposed against his very life, and as I mentioned, some of the things that happened now. So I want to, in this introduction, I also want to talk about the joys of writing. I'm sure it has given you great joy, are you putting this text together, because when you read about Jensma's life, the very vocabulary that he used, the tone, the pacing of his words, etc., there's real emotion there. And I also ask myself, how did you choose Wopko? Because remember, Johan van Wyk was my neighbor long before you knew him. And Johan used to speak about Wopko because Johan and Jean-Philippe and the other guy, the Greek guy, were putting that South African literature together, that 500-600 page book. And Wopko was included in that very early in South African literature, where we found a mixture of Afrikaans, African languages, and English as well. And I remember Johan talking about Wopko, especially about his life. I think I'm giving up too much about the book, so you can tell us how this book took shape, etc., and of course the satisfaction you got, and so maybe the leading question is, why did you choose this poet for this book project? Collins, do you have a mic for
Testing. it's quite interesting. I began this study because of Professor Johan van Wyk, who's late now. And it was a PhD study initially. It's interesting in a sense that Wopko, there was a big argument and debate whether he was schizophrenic or what is normality. In fact, there's a ongoing running battle between Michael Gardner and another psychiatrist, Phil Duplessis, who was insisting that Wopko was mad, schizophrenic, and Michael Gardner was saying that he's just experimenting with words, and it's a manifestation of postmodern reality. Towards the end of that PhD, my supervisor, unfortunately, he also had some mental challenges, and I had to change the supervisor to Jean-Philippe. And, you know, I'm sitting there, young guy, 3 o'clock in the morning, reading the work. I read all the books on schizophrenia. And what stands out is that those people who look too deep into schizophrenia seldom come out of it. So I also was petrified. But here I am, totally normal. I ignored the birds making sarcastic comments in the morning. Yeah, so that's the reason why I chose this book. And it's been a very interesting and intriguing journey. I went to the archives in the National English Literary Museum to access Wopko's private correspondence. And the thing that stays with me was that when I went there, the curator of that National English Literary Museum was Malcolm Huxley. And he took me for accommodation in a nearby B&B. I was standing there with my family, and then the lady says, if you can stand them, so can we. And I was just thinking that Wopko had written all his life about racism, and here I am researching him, and I'm being faced with the same kinds of issues. Yeah, so of course I didn't stay there. So I also, fortunately, I had this, when I finished this study, the examiner's reports were very humbling in their accolades. And I was awarded Alexander Humboldt Scholarship in Germany and the Andrew Mellon Postdoctoral Fellowship here in Howard College. I also then had an opportunity to go to Texas. You may ask yourself, why Texas? In the Harry Ransom archives, unfortunately, most of his private letters, his draft poetry is located in the Harry Ransom archives. I don't know if this is another form of colonization. I don't know what to think of that. And also had some time in Germany with the professors Erhard Lehmann and Reckwitz, Elmar Lehmann and Erhard Reckwitz, and under their guidance in tutelage, much of this work originated. So yeah, it's been an interesting and fulfilling, if sometimes a frustrating experience, because there's a concrete poetry is shaped like a knee, and it's called knee deep in the kak. That's all. Every word is knee deep in the kak, knee deep in the kak. And I was knee deep in the kak by the time I finished typing that out. Thank you.
So, are you there's a very interesting tension. Yeah, there's a very interesting tension between schizophrenia on the one hand and the poetry. How would share with us some of that poetry? But before you do that, I just want to say that Texas has got the largest collection of South African literature resources because they've got so much money. And each time a South African author passes on, the money that they offer to the families, so I know Stephen Gray's whole library went down. So all the personal libraries of our writers are in Texas. Yes, and so it's not only the colonial, it's also the empire with money. So to come back to the schizophrenia and poetry, can you tell us about whether when you read the poetry or when you analyze the poems, did you find any tension there with the schizophrenia?
Yes, most certainly. It's very apparent because Wopko, remember Wopko was a white man and khaki outfit with this felt schoons. This was his common apparel. But many people thought he was a black man. And there were 2 reviews written on the assumption that he was African, because he so closely identified with the oppressed, poor, the disenfranchised, and the hopelessly persecuted. Remember, Wopko was writing in the 70s at this stage. And how is schizophrenia manifest in his poetry? Well, I just recall at the top of my head the poem, I look at myself sleeping. I look at myself going for a piss. I keep on looking at myself, not knowing that I am being watched. So in terms of confinement, where the personality splits, I remember in my research, I was looking at how schizophrenia becomes manifest in certain individuals. And there was this account of a 6-year-old child who was being raped by her uncle. And she, many years later, when she was grown up, she's sitting with a can of Coke in her hand. And as she's recalling this gruesome events to a psychiatrist, she crushes that can and it crumbles in her hand. And she says that she wasn't there anymore. She was on the ceiling, looking down at what was happening. So under cases of extreme trauma, I mean, schizophrenia has many etiologies, but under cases of extreme trauma, the personality can split as a way of coping with an intolerable, an insufferable condition and situation. And Wopko's tremendous sense of empathy for black people in the 70s, if you just look at his books, Where White is the Color, Where Black is the Number, taken from a Bob Dylan song, okay? White being a preferable color and black being just a commodity, a number, a disposable entity. Then his book, Have You Seen My Clippings? A nice, delightful title with photographs that he had taken. And you'd see black faces and even white faces. And coming back to your issue about the schizophrenia, so not only is it manifest in altered personalities, it's also, schizophrenics are known to write in, if they communicate in word salads. Like, you know how you mix a salad? The words are all like, what's this guy in Star Wars? Yoda. Well, a bit more extremer than Yoda, okay? where the verb will be in the wrong place and the noun will be in the wrong place. In a sense, Wopko, some people were saying this was his experiments with writing. Others were saying it's a manifestation of this disease. In fact, he was certified as a schizophrenic and treated for schizophrenia in the Westcopies Hospital and in the Johannesburg State Hospital. And then there was a lecturer here, Sheila Roberts. I don't know if anyone remembers Sheila Roberts. And she was Wopko's friend, and Wopko stayed with her a few weeks now and then. She had a huge house here somewhere on the coast in Cape Town. And she said, I interviewed her, and she said that Wopko was not mad. It was the drugs in the hospital that made her mad. I remember that very clearly. Okay? And well, Wopko also played on his madness. He worked all over in Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Botswana. He worked in the same school where Bessie Head was teaching, and he taught arts and crafts. And it was very interesting to note that he took the head of when he was teaching here in Doornfontein. The head of the school was a black guy. And he took him to the Home Affairs. This was the time of apartheid. And Wopko left 7 empty chairs and he sat on the floor. He was claiming disability because he was mad. Now, interestingly, what made those guys in the Home Affairs believe him was when this black man said, I am his boss, I am his principal. And they shook their head and they signed his documents. Yes, he must be mad. So you can see from where we came to where we are now. So fragmentation, syntactic dislocation, the use of a mutilation in his poetry, which I will talk about again. These were some of the manifestations of schizophrenia, but particularly the alter personalities which abound in his text. What was also interesting is how he, like in some poems, he writes as if he is the suffering, wretched black person oppressed by apartheid, oppressed by race and class oppression. For example, he says, I wonder why all these blacks in these Bantustans don't have their feet cut off. It would give them freedom of movement. So he's being ironical, but he's also painting pictures of how the Apartheid, the Group Areas Act, the past laws infringed on the rights of people, the rightful owners of the land. Thank you.
Yeah, it was actually the Department of Social Development. I'm not sure they had Home Affairs.
Yeah.
Did they?
Okay.
So can you imagine, this man was such a genius. He didn't want to work. So he got this brilliant plot that he would go and collect, like the SASA grant that we have now. And it was such a gem to enter there with his boss and sit on the floor. And when they asked him, hey, they asked the black man, are you the worker? The black man said, I am the boss. They actually also thought that the boss was also Dilly, Well, and this guy collected that SASA, whatever you call that grant, because he was so sharp. So it links up to what Foucault says, a very fine line between being a genius and the notion of madness and insanity. I'm going to put you in the box now, Ayub, because I like that the music as intertext, jazz, Kwela, Malabanta, and the kind of lyrics that is play with it. Can you share with us
Yeah, Wopko was a very, well, top of his personal predilections. He liked listening to the Portuguese fados, which is a sad lament. According to him, in one of his letters I can recall now, about a song that are almost crying, but not. And he was very much influenced by the rhythm and the lexical items of jazz. So the rhythms and blues and the jazz, was a conduit for American slaves in his Genesis about suffering and oppression and hope for a better tomorrow, the things that helped them endure intolerable circumstances. I'm just thinking the same circumstances that will happen if Donald Trump wins the election. So these things, there's also a lot of intertextual allusions to rhythms and blues writers like Jimmy Rushing. I can't recall this guy's name now. But, oh yes, Big Bill Brunzi. I feel like hollering, but the town is too small. I actually like that so much. I wrote the first full-length biography of Wopko by interviewing different people, looking at the information I collected from the archives, and that's published in Alternation. That was a long time ago. So he also, Wopko spoke many languages. And the thing that was so profound about him was when they asked him, why does he write in so many languages? And with reference to so much of musicality. And Wopko's answer was, some interpret as profound. I'd like you to think about this. What language does God speak? So the use of African music was also a prominent motif in his poetry. For example, the Marabenta dance, very energetic dance, and if you translate it into English, it's we dance until we burst. So you can imagine, the idea of Africans dancing their troubles away was very evident there. And of course, it lends. So Wopko's poetry is not the conventional poetry where rhyme, meter, and the end rhymes, the rhythmic pattern is evident. It appeals more to the acoustic dimension, the sound dimension. Thank you.
Yeah. Before I ask the next question, I would like to decolonize the space and invite the audience to ask Ayub questions.
Thanks, Rajendra. Peter Horn was a long-standing associate, fellow poet, activist, Brechtian, who had a friendship with Jensma, and I believe was also at the center of the controversy over his madness or otherwise. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, Peter Horn didn't like me because a while ago, when Peter Horn was alive, then he's late now, I had interviewed a lot of people, and Wopko had married a black woman and from Zimbabwe, that's Swaziland. How we met her was he was invited, he was more famed in his lifetime for his paintings, his graphic art, and his silk screen paintings and his woodcuts, etc. And that's how he made some of his money, by selling those things. So when he was there in the King Sobuza invited him. And there he met this beautiful African lady called Lydia, and he married her. And remember, he was come from a strict Afrikaner family, so I don't have to tell you what happened next. Immediately his entire family disowned him. And Wopko, in his correspondence, which I saw there in Texas, very troubled about the Group Areas Act, the Mixed Marriages Act, the prohibition on having relationships across the color line. He was actually scared, writing to Peter Horn saying, I'm scared of coming back to South Africa because I would be arrested. And I hate confined spaces of all sorts, and it would be most unfortunate. But the marriage, why Peter Horn is angry with me? Well, a lot of people told me that Lydia, his wife, became a prostitute outside the Holiday Inn's hotel there, and where he used to sell his artwork. And she abused him a lot. In fact, she should take a broomstick and hit him on his heels, because Wopko was getting into a stage of intellectual decline, as the disease progressed in him. And one of his friends drove all the way from Johannesburg to Bulawayo in a Beetle. And he said there was a child's pram there. He hit the wife with the child's pram, and while she was busy recovering, he dragged and put Wopko in the Beetle, and that's how he escaped that marriage. And a lot of Wopko's poems are autobiographical in the sense, where he writes about all these sufferings. For example, Prof. Chetty mentioned that he lost his brother. And that also became a schizophrenic episode, where he says that he remembered his brother's nose stuffed in cotton wool and looking at him down there drowned in the dam. And then a week later, I saw him in the market and I greeted him. So it's interesting the way trauma is manifest and displayed in his poetry. Thanks.
And also, Peter Horn was English lecturer at Kwatlengeswa. That's where Vuyo is now. Yes. Could we have another? And he didn't. Wopko didn't complete his degree, so Peter tried to get him a scholarship, and eventually he did go and do the teaching diploma at Potchefstroom University.
It's very interesting you mentioned that, because Wopko was a bit of a mischievous student. For example, they asked in the art class, they were asking him to draw something, and he'd draw a huge leg on the whole page. And that frustrated the lecturer, Leo Taron, his name was, and he told Wopko, you can sit there till your hair turns grey. I will never pass you. So that was the intriguing battle between them.
Anybody else wants to ask Ayub a question? Karan, why are you all sitting so quietly? It's such an interesting author, such an interesting poet, such an interesting South African. The rich texture in his life.
Yeah, what was also very interesting was, I think he's probably the only South African poet who appeared in the pictures in Playboy magazine. So don't ask me why, but it was there. And, my son is here now, so... Not to say that I was looking at Playboy magazine, okay?
I was gonna say I prefer your literature better. The Playboy magazine.
Yeah. So, and in fact, when his illness grew progressively worse, his pension, that one that he had so artfully bargained for in the social welfare department, was being paid at the tuck shop in that Johannesburg hospital, the psychiatric hospital. And so how it works, like, because he was a patient there, he would go to the tuck shop and take credit against what the money, the home affair, the social welfare had paid into him. So when Michael Gardner went to visit him last, he was sitting on the floor, and he said it's very sad that a thing like hot coffee would thrill this person more than anything else. And one day, Michael Gardner went to pick him up for an art exhibition, and he was nowhere to be found. He had wandered off somewhere. And this was the enigma even in his death, when the Mail and Guardian had written there a big article looking for Wopko Jensma, and there was some buzz and excitement that he has been found, but that rumors didn't prove to be true at all. So that's where his enigmatic things, you hear things like, oh, Elvis is alive. Well, Wopko fits in the same kind of category, in disappeared into myth. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a very interesting three, unfortunately all male kind of intersection here, and I was wondering whether you would share light on it. There's Wopko, there's your supervisor who also ended up with schizophrenia, also had an affair with a black woman who also became a prostitute, and also the ending of Johan's life and Wopko's life was, there seems to be similarities, and for me, there's very deep resonance as well. And you were in the middle of this, it
Yeah,
seems.
but I'm not going there.
Okay, don't go there, that's
telling
fine.
you.
So, Ayub, tell us about the joy of writing. I'm coming back to my introduction now. What joy does one get from writing a text like this?
Well, looking at his private correspondence, he says that he believed in the Zen Buddhist credo of first thought, best thought. And he never changed his poetry. Although Peter Horn insisted, like Peter Horn was telling him, you can't use watchmaker's tools to change a car engine. Because what he meant by that, Wopko was writing about using the influences of Dada, Surrealism, the avant-garde, the European Cubism, all those experimental writings that were coming out and in a South African context. And according to Peter Horn, was quite traditional in that sense. It just didn't gel. Using surrealism to write about South African poetry, indicating the suffering of the black majority and the pain and tears and blood that was wasted. Wopko wrote a lot about Sharpeville in some of his poems, and using a lot of irony in his poems. So the joy also was, I would say, the joy of discovery. Like when he ventricularized the voice of the white khaki farmer entrenched in apartheid. I do not feel a thing. A little kindness only hardens my heart. I am white and brutal. I come to you in the middle of the night. So actually uses, he ventricularizes his voice as the oppressor and as the oppressed. And this is where also then the schizophrenic thing comes up. Who exactly is Wopko? Which persona is speaking at this particular moment in time? These are very intriguing questions. Yes, Feline?
My question, it sounds as if you became very immersed in this project as you were going through it, and rightfully so. I don't think you can do it in any other way. My question is the opposite of Prof. Chetty's. What was your challenges in writing this piece, and how did you cope with those? Because as you going through what he's going through, how do you not go through it yourself? And what were the mechanisms that you used to kind of, for lack of a better phrase, keep your sanity?
Well, you know, I don't want to show off, but when I finished this thesis, and I actually told my supervisor, there was then the new supervisor, that in my mind, I hadn't moved out of second year. And yeah, I've got this fascinating reports on the study. So I think I handled this thing quite well. And it was also very informative. You know, the thing that I remember about apartheid was we were small boys staying in town, Durban, and we had walked barefoot. We should always go everywhere barefoot to the beachfront. And I was with a colored friend of mine because we stayed in the same building. Right. And he's small, we were small, and he just touched a white man's car. And the man came out and left his 5-finger mark on his face. And his name was Karan, and he was crying and asking me why. And that still haunts me, because I wasn't able to answer him. And I could have this tremendous empathy with what Wopko was writing about in apartheid, right? Some of his lines, we praise thee for him who is coming to kill us again. And talking about the raised settlements, like when he wrote about Sophia Town and the forced removals in Sophia Town. He says, in Sophia Town, Ken Tember, the great writer in Drum magazine, climbs the steps, or what is left of them. Then he opens the door carefully, full unto the sky. Only the door is left, the whole house is raised. Then he locked up carefully and went downstairs for his house to rise again, for his people's legs and arms to be stuck back in place. In the morning, they found him cold as a stone, sparrows pecking his eyes. So you can see how graphic and immediate this anguish is written and scrawled on the pages of writing. Yeah.
That was a very good question. I like the way you changed my
Yes, another
choice of writing to challenges.
Another challenge was he wrote in so many languages, Portuguese words, French words, German. I didn't know Peter then, so I had big trouble trying to translate all those things. And he actually, in his letters, he wrote there, I write in the Afrikaans of the Karoo Lat. And I was a dance in Afrikaans. So all these things were quite challenging. And then, of course, when he's writing about consumer culture, which is one of the popular themes of his, glitter, rattle, my uni, steel liner, different topography, different punctuation, capital letters where they're not supposed to be capital letters, dashes. If you looked at that, it was very bewildering and confusing. But I think, my football coach used to say, nobody tries as hard as you, Ayub. And I think it was that spirit, that resilience and determination. I know when I did my master's, the same Professor Johan van Veek asked me to write about a high school teacher called Bidi Lala. And there was no books on Bidi Lala. And I only had found the 3 volumes of poetry that he had written and got it from his son, who was a lawyer. And half the things were eaten out. And I just remember coming down that Martin West building in West Street in Durban and walking. And I was determined. I am going to do this. I went to the library to look and they said there's not a single book there. How are you going to do a master's thesis on this? And that was very interesting because the day I was supposed to hand in that thesis, that time we didn't have laptops and stuff, so we had to go to the university to do the work in the computer lab. And 8 o'clock morning, I had finished, sat the whole night doing the final editing because it was due the next day. And I had all this yellow, green, blue hard disk for each chapter. So I said, let's go to the cafeteria and come back and have a Coke. And I came back, all the disc was gone. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. So I started thinking, okay, I did that chapter there, I sat over there, and I became like Wopko now, because he writes, I was born in the Ventersdorp, I was born in the Kalahari, I was born in different places, you know. I felt that kind of fear. So I put everything together with all its mistakes, and Professor Ampi Kutsia had written, whereas I would have given 85% for this thesis, I'm forced to reduce it to 80% because of all the errors that crept in when I put in all those things. And yeah, so it was that perseverance and persistence. I remember like using the challenge, of course, was theorizing this and Deleuze and Guattari's theories, the rhizomatic theories were very complex. Reading Homi Bhabha at that time was very complex. Homi Bhabha writes something like normalizing the normal. What the hell does that mean? You know, if you tell my friends, even if I held the book upside down, it would mean the same thing to me. But I stuck it out. And now, yes, I can understand and read it quite critically. Thank you.
Yeah, you really take my memory back to 1994. And it's 20 years ago when I put a book, an edited volume, and you contributed a chapter on the B.D. Lala study that you did, and it was really well received. So thank you for jogging my memory there, Ayub. So we go back a long way. Yeah, so even with the B.D. Lala, it seems to be, you you're such a good researcher that the outsiders, you don't rely so much on the secondary sources, and you just relied on the analysis of the primary sources and putting these texts together. And I think that on that note, I would like to bring the launch to an end, and on behalf of all of you, I'd really want us to congratulate Ayub on this fine achievement, and if you can all stand and give him a big round of applause. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
There's a few scones left, so you can enjoy.